From the New Arts and Media Studios in River West, I'm Charles Purcell, and this is The Log. Well, from the Stuff We Always Knew file, and it's finally been confirmed, Attorney General William Barr, under the Orange Menace, lied to Congress, lied to the American people about the Mueller investigation. So we knew it. It was obvious. But just last week, federal judge, U.S. District Court Judge Amy Jackson, issued a blistering rebuke of the Department of Justice and former Attorney General Bill Barr, accusing the department of misleading the court and Congress about the Mueller investigation and how Barr came to the decision not to charge then-President with obstruction of justice. Judge Jackson's ruling also ordered the DOJ to release a secret memo related to the case and Barr's decision to ultimately let off the hook. While he was running the Justice Department, Barr actively fought its release, claiming it was protected because it involved private advice from lawyers Barr consulted with. Judge Jackson shot that down, saying the memo was full of strategic advice. Reading there from newsandguts.com. So we walk this fine line all the time. We don't want to go back. We want to look forward. We want to forget how horrible it all was. But I'm of the school that believes we really can't let this stuff go. The Orange Menace himself and all of his henchmen need to be in orange jumpsuits. They need to be behind bars. They need to be held responsible, be held accountable, be found guilty on all appropriate charges, loudly, publicly, put them in jail. We just can't let this sort of thing go by, and most importantly, we can't ever let it happen again. So I understand this urge. I share it. I don't want to think about those days. I just want it all to be over like a bad dream. But we don't have that luxury. And speaking of that infamous Department of Justice under the Orange Menace, another story, advocates for press freedom responded with outrage after the Washington Post reported last week that former President Donald Trump's Justice Department secretly obtained the phone records and attempted to obtain the email records of 3 Post journalists who covered Russia's interference in the 2016 presidential election. The Department of Justice should immediately make clear its reasons for this intrusion into the activities of reporters doing their jobs. Quoted there Cameron Barr of the Washington Post. According to the newspaper, Post reporters Ellen Nakashima and Greg Miller and former Post reporter Adam Enthouse all received letters from the Justice Department earlier this week alerting them that, pursuant to a legal process that reportedly took place in 2020, the DOJ had acquired toll records associated with the 3 journalists' work, home, or cell phone numbers between April 15, 2017 and July 31, 2017. We are deeply troubled by this use of government power to seek access to the communications of journalists, said Cameron Barr, the acting executive editor of the Post. The Department of Justice should immediately make clear its reasons for this intrusion into the activities of reporters doing their jobs, an activity protected under the First Amendment. So there's another kind of old news story that, old news is new news. And again, we cannot turn our backs on this kind of stuff. I mean, we all knew it. We all saw it happening in real time. We saw crimes happening right before our eyes. Reminded me of when I was a kid and I saw Jack Ruby shoot Lee Harvey Oswald on live television. It's like, oh, look, a crime. Oh, look, there's another crime. Oh, look, William Barr is lying to a congressional committee. Well, that's interesting. That's a crime, isn't it? Can't you go to jail for that? Oh, look, the President of the United States is an unindicted co-conspirator. Shouldn't something happen there? Anyway, I feel some obligation to mention these stories when they come up. and just to remind us again. And that's not even to mention the most recent stuff, of course, January 6th and everything around that. There's still, every day of the week, there's some sort of headline there. Somebody else is arrested. I guess the guy who had his feet up on Nancy Pelosi's desk kind of wrecked the place and damaged it a little bit, stole a couple of things. Yeah, he's not getting away with anything. He's in some pretty deep trouble, so that's good. But everything from that damned administration right up to the very bitter end, as much as we want to let it go, nobody sympathizes with you more than I do. Oh my God, I just wish we could just forget about the whole thing, but we can't. I mean, there's the very simple idea of just serving justice, but there's a practical reason too. We just have to root out the bad guys, make sure they are stripped of any power here and going forward. We have to make examples of them. They have to be officially condemned as the villains they are. History has to have no room to fudge any of this. Oh, well, one party said this, another party said that. It was a controversial. No. None of this can be controversial. We have to have this in black and white. People have to be convicted. They have to be on trial. They have to be made examples of. They have to be behind bars. And history needs to be clear. There were good guys and there were bad guys here. And the bad guys got caught and they were punished. And we have put up extra defenses to make sure there's never anything even close to it ever happens again. And we're nowhere near that state of affairs right now. We are still, sadly, in a world where the apologists still get slots on cable news shows. Hell, they're the hosts of some of these news shows. They're some of the highest rated hosts in American television. So, no, we have a long way to go. And we can't let it slide. We just can't. Catching up on a couple headlines here I've skipped over the weeks. This is from last week also, I believe. New soil study shows pesticides destroying the very foundations of web of life. There's the headline from Common Dreams. Jessica Corbett, staff writer. A study published Tuesday in the journal Frontiers in Environmental Science bolsters alarm about the role that agriculture pesticides play in what scientists have dubbed the bugpocalypse, and led authors to call for stricter regulations across the U.S. Researchers at the University of Maryland, as well as the advocacy groups Friends of the Earth U.S. and the Center for Biological Diversity, were behind what they say is the largest, most comprehensive review of the impacts of agricultural pesticides on soil organisms ever conducted. The study's authors warn the analyzed pesticides pose a grave danger to invertebrates that are essential for biodiversity, healthy soil, and carbon sequestration to fight the climate emergency. And U.S. regulators are not focused on these threats. Below the surface of fields covered with monoculture crops of corn and soybeans, pesticides are destroying the very foundations of the web of life, said study co-author Nathan Donnelly, a scientist at the Center for Biological Diversity, in a statement. Study after study indicates that unchecked use of pesticides across hundreds of millions of acres each year is poisoning the organisms critical to maintaining healthy soils, Donnelly added. Yet our regulators have been ignoring the harm to these important ecosystems for decades. If you want to read more on that, again, it's from commondreams.org. New soil study shows pesticides destroying the very foundation of web of life. Yeah, it's just incredible to think this is not some sort of new information. This is not scientists telling us all for the first time, you can't really do that to the soil. It's going to denigrate the soil and it's going to kill the insects that are needed for rich soil. And as a result, it's going to affect the entire ecosystem, and it's going to impact the climate crisis, and biodiversity and climate crisis are very closely related. And surprise? No, it's not a surprise. They're not telling us any of this for the first time. They've been trying to tell us for years. And but translating that information into any kind of policy has so far just been impossible. So what to do, except yell about it here. Well, I'll tell you this much. This much is for sure. We have to all become abolitionists. Abolition should be the key word going forward. And every one of us needs to embrace the concept of abolition. We have to all be abolitionists. And in this case, we have to abolish, and I mean that very literally, we have to end entirely corporate agribusiness. We can't have Bill Gates. I don't have it here in front of me. He owns half the farmland in America. And I might be exaggerating, but not by much. I mean, he actually does own a huge portion of American farmland. We can't have big ag anymore. It has to go away entirely. We have to scale down the size of agribusiness. We have to return the earth to local farmers, to local communities, people with a conscience. Everything has to become local when it comes to food production and distribution. We just have to find a way to do it, because the corporations are not going to do the right thing. It's not in their nature. It's not that they're bad people. Well, they are, but that's not the point. They're just incapable. We did a pretty lengthy piece, I don't know, a year or two ago now, by Chris Hedges. This was just around the time that Greta Thunberg was starting to make a name for herself, and she was scolding the adults of the planet for not getting it done. But Chris Hedges, the great writer and activist, pointed out, yeah, that's right, but you're talking to the wrong people. They can't do what you want them to do. Their interests lie elsewhere, and they are incapable of making that sort of change. In order to get the change we need, we have to find a way, and this is Chris Hedges now talking, not me, but I agree. We have to take the power away from them. They're not going to do the right thing. They, just by very definition, they can't do it. They're incapable of doing it. So it's a question of power, just like it's always been through the history of humankind, I guess. It's always just about who holds the power. And the corporate elites and their partners in the state houses and palaces and the White House and 10 Downing and everywhere else, those who hold great power are incapable of making the changes we need. So we have to first wrest that power and then make the changes ourselves. Not a small task. Nobody's saying that it is, but sadly that's the position we're in. So the scientists can yell until they're all blue in the face and tell us that pesticides are destroying, once again, the very foundations of the web of life. How many headlines like this will it take to get the powerful, the elite, to do the right thing? You could have 1 million headlines, 10 million headlines. It's not going to make a difference because they're not capable of making the change. Speaking of the powerful, of the elite that need to be toppled, one of the most dangerous men on the planet continues to wreak havoc, and that, of course, Brazil's president, Jair Bolsonaro. From Vox.com. We're just a few months into the year, and things are already looking bleak in the Brazilian Amazon. About 430,000 acres of its lush, species-rich forests have been logged or burned so far in 2021, according to a new analysis of satellite imagery by the Monitoring of the Andean Amazon Project, MAAP. That's an area roughly 30 times the size of Manhattan. The analysis published earlier this week comes as Brazil's president, Jair Bolsonaro, is negotiating a deal with U.S. officials to funnel what could be billions of dollars into his administration to eliminate illegal deforestation within the decade. At President Joe Biden's Climate Leaders Summit in April, Bolsonaro vowed Brazil would become carbon neutral by 2050 and recommitted to net zero deforestation by 2030. A target his government had previously deserted. We could not agree more with your call for establishing ambitious commitments on the climate agenda, Bolsonaro said at the virtual event. The U.S. is among a handful of foreign governments that have been pushing Brazil to better protect its forests. But a large number of activists, organizations, and former environment ministers warn that giving money to the Bolsonaro administration won't solve the problem and could even make it worse. Either way, the new MAAP report shows that the situation on the ground is dire as the Amazon gets one step closer to a dangerous tipping point beyond which it could dry out. Bolsonaro's comforting words aside, I don't trust the guy further than I could throw him. Deforestation in Brazil, as this headline puts it, is out of control. So Bolsonaro has his hands out to the world community asking for billions of dollars. Oh, give me billions of dollars. You can trust me. Yeah, I don't think so. According to some studies, this is not easy to measure, but I saw a report a couple of weeks ago that said that the Brazilian rainforest region is now a net emitter of greenhouse gases. What was sometimes called the lungs of the earth, always a bit of an exaggeration, but always a true statement that it was a great source of carbon capture. The scales have tilted because of all the deforestation, because of the great fires, that the region is now a net emitter of carbon dioxide as opposed to a carbon capture region. So that's how quickly the situation has deteriorated in just the last couple of decades. And Bolsonaro, he's not alone in this, but he's certainly among the high-profile global criminals in this area, guilty of ecocide. If there was any justice in this world, there'd be a global court putting the likes of Bolsonaro and the Orange Menace behind bars just for their not only reckless, but it would seem intentional aiding and abetting climate crisis. We're trying to have some hope here with the new administration. The Vox article continues with a question. Could things change under Biden? President Biden has made it clear that protecting the Amazon will be part of his ambitious climate change agenda, though it's not clear how he'll manage to do it. At a debate last fall, Biden said foreign governments should provide Brazil with $20 billion in aid to stop deforestation. He added that the country should face consequences if forest loss continues unabated. In the weeks leading up to the Earth Day summit, officials from the Biden administration held closed-door meetings with Ricardo Salles, Brazil's Minister of the Environment, to find common ground. And in mid-April, Bolsonaro sent a letter to Biden reaffirming a commitment to net zero deforestation by 2030, in which he emphasized that such a goal would only be achievable with substantial resources. What's substantial? In an interview with the Wall Street Journal ahead of the summit, Salles said $1 billion is a very reasonable amount that can be mobilized up front. But critics have warned Biden not to trust Bolsonaro and to avoid making the deal. President Bolsonaro is deeply untrusted by environmental and social groups who have called him the Amazon's worst enemy. They say that any deal with Bolsonaro will be bad for the Amazon and the people who live there. Negotiating with Bolsonaro was not the same as helping Brazil solve its problems. Nearly 200 organizations wrote in a letter to Biden in early April, pleading with him not to strike a deal until Bolsonaro's administration shows tangible results. The U.S. and other governments have indicated that foreign aid would be contingent on Brazil drawing up a clear plan to curb forest loss that involves local communities. So far this year, however, Brazil seems to have made little headway toward that goal. In the same week that Bolsonaro sent Biden the letter recommitting to net zero deforestation, his administration changed the rules for fining environmental crimes that slow their payments. And while Bolsonaro said he'd double the budget for environmental enforcement during the Climate Leaders Summit, he approved a cut to the budget a day later. What the government is missing is not cash, the ministers wrote in the op-ed, but a commitment to the truth. So we have a very bad player on the world stage here in Bolsonaro. Just one more reminder how we have to get our priorities straight. To my mind, there are two pressing problems that need immediate attention and relentless attention, undying, even when we're tired of it. And that's the first thing I started with. That is the saving democracy, the very idea of democracy, and not allowing the fascists to take hold. punishing the fascists. We've drummed some of them out of office, thank goodness, but many remain, and many are planning a comeback. So that's a fight we cannot afford to lose. And it's one we have to keep our focus on. We have to punish the wrongdoing of the Orange Menace and Bill Barr and the whole merry band of them. We can't let them get a foothold for a return attack. So that's one of the two major issues that we have to keep focused on. And the other is obviously the environment. It's climate crisis. It's biodiversity. It's ecocide. It's mass extinction. All the rest of it is just noise by comparison. I mean, sure, every news cycle has a few interesting tidbits here and there, and some of them are important and some of them aren't. And we have to have the discipline as a nation to keep our eyes on the prize, to face up to the real existential dangers, and to make sure they're always our top priority. And for those who would hammer the final nail into the coffin of democracy, well, they just have to be stopped. We cannot let our guard down for a second. And for those who would sacrifice the very planet we live on for short-term gain and power, we can't let them have their day either. One more headline that's been sitting in here in my file for a week or two or more. I'm guilty of this too. I get caught up in the news of the day, and I forget to mention to you, did you know the Earth's axis has actually shifted because of climate crisis? Yeah, how's that for a headline? Climate crisis has shifted the Earth's axis, according to a new study. Now, you heard it right. You heard it right. Truthout.org. A story originally appeared in The Guardian. The massive melting of glaciers as a result of global heating has caused marked shifts in the Earth's axis of rotation since the 1990s, research has shown. It demonstrates the profound impact humans are having on the planet, scientists said. The planet's geographic north and south poles are the point where its axis of rotation intersects the surface, but they are not fixed. Changes in how the Earth's mass is distributed around the planet cause the axis and therefore the poles to move. In the past, only natural factors such as ocean currents and the convection of hot rock in the deep earth contributed to the drifting position of the poles. But the new research shows that since the 1990s, the loss of hundreds of billions of tons of ice a year into the oceans resulting from the climate crisis has caused the poles to move in new directions. The scientists found the directions of polar drift shifted from southward to eastward in 1995, and that the average speed of drift from 1995 to 2020 was 17 times faster than from 1981 to 1995. Since 1980, the position of the poles has moved about 4 meters in distance. The accelerated decline in water stored on land, resulting from glacial ice melting, is the main driver of the rapid polar drift after the 1990s, concluded the team led by Shanshan Deng from the Institute of Geographic Sciences and Natural Resources Research at the Chinese Academy of Sciences. Gravity data from the GRACE satellite, launched in 2002, had been used to link glacial melting to movements of the pole in 2005 and 2012, both following increases in ice losses. But Deng's research breaks new ground by extending the link to before the satellite's launch, showing human activities have been shifting the poles since the 1990s, almost 3 decades ago. Professor Jonathan Overpeck at the University of Arizona told The Guardian that changes to the Earth's axis highlighted how real and profoundly large an impact humans are having on the planet. Since the mid-20th century, there has been a marked acceleration of carbon dioxide emissions and sea level rise, the destruction of wildlife, and the transformation of land by farming, deforestation, and development. There is no kidding around here. The rise of sea levels, the shift of the jet stream, rising temperatures, increased vapor in the air, more extreme weather patterns. We're seeing it in live time. We're seeing it right now. And the devastation is only going to get worse and worse unless we do something about it right now. Not a year from now, not 10, 20, or 30 years from now, right now. And it starts with power. It starts with taking that power by saving democracy and using it. I mean, sure, we can demand action from corporate CEOs and their political partners. I'm not saying we shouldn't demand action. Yeah, stand up, demand action. But I wouldn't count on anything happening. Because I agree with Chris Hedges. The corporate CEOs, their political partners, are not going to do it. They're incapable of doing it. So we have to take the reins of power from them and do it ourselves. And if you can think of a better system than democracy, please let me know what it is. And when I say democracy, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we just sit back and quietly say yes sir, no sir, and then go to the voting booth once every couple of years. No, within the scope of democracy, there is protest, there is direct action, there is civil disobedience, there are strategies and methods, there's organizing, there's organized boycotts and strikes. Yeah, when I say take power, I mean take power. I mean do what needs to be done. I don't want you ever to mistake what I'm saying. When I advocate for democracy, I'm not saying we need to be timid and just wait for the next election. No, 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 no. In the fight for power, we need to use every tool at our disposal, short of violence. I will not go there. I don't care how desperate things get. I'm not ever going to go to the violent side of things. But direct action, yes. Civil disobedience, yes. Disruption, yes. We talked about this a lot over the course of the summer and the Black Lives Matter protests. And people getting the wrong idea that peaceful protest means, oh, you just stay on the sidewalk and you carry a sign and you sing a song, but other than that, you just behave yourself. No, no. Civil disobedience, disruption, occupying buildings, blocking roads and freeways. None of that is violence. It's direct action. And yes, disruption is an important part of direct action. So don't ever get the wrong idea. We should never be limited to singing Kumbaya in some little designated roped-off protest area and be all nice and kind and polite about it. No, we need to make an awful lot of damn noise. We have to disrupt the system. We have to throw wrenches into the gears of the system itself, and we have to take power. And when those elections do come along, every few months, every couple of years, every 4 years, local elections, primaries, statewide, federal, take advantage of every single one of those opportunities as well. The best way to save democracy is to use democracy. It's like building up your muscles. Best way to build your muscles is to use them. Best way to build democracy is to use it. And those are the two biggest items on my agenda right now. We have to save democracy, and we have to save the planet. The two agenda items go very much hand in hand, and we can't let the distractions of the 24-hour news cycle take our eyes off the prize for 1 minute. Democracy and the planet. We got to save them both. So let's get out there and do it. Do what you need to do. Put yourself in the fight. I love you. I'm Charles Purcell.